Since last November, my electric bill now ranges from $325 to $350 a month.
So we're here in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, looking out over Narragansett Bay, and we have the Raytheon company out in back of me where I worked, and we have Quonset Point on the opposite side of the bay where John has worked. So John and I have connections through that building over there, because I used to produce reactors for the Navy. I built them for a company that built reactors for the Navy that went on submarines. Submarines are built right over there at Quonset Point, where all the white buildings are, and John worked there. So the reactors actually got installed in Groton, but the submarine is built right there at Quonset Point, and John had a lot to do with putting together the insides of the submarine there. I think welding the whole hull sections together. They're actually built there as big cylinders and welded together, right, John?
And when the Navy left, they turned Quonset Point into a fabrication facility. The 80s, I got into the Steamfitters Union and got into commercial nuclear power, construction of reactors commercially.
All over the world. I'm just ad-libbing because I know he's been all over the world, including China, where they build lots of everything.
I try not to mention that these days, but I did go to China 3 different times. They needed our technology. Now I think they got the whole kit caboodle.
Now they've taken it all and they're building it at a quarter to maybe a sixth of the price of whatever we build here as far as nuclear reactors. That's why we don't build them in this country. Among other things, they're too expensive. And the welding that takes place over there is part of the deal when these cylinders from the submarines are all welded together, which John did. The cylinders then go down on a barge to New London, Connecticut, Groton, Connecticut, where they're on a land level facility all welded together to form the complete submarine. And that's when the reactor gets loaded in. And we built these reactors on assembly lines, 10 or 20 at a time. That many out the back door of the plant that was in Uncasville, Connecticut. And that gives you some idea of the local color of what went on in the state of Rhode Island. We built a lot of reactors.
So instead, they want to put a big cable down this area, down this water.
Exactly. Now the cable situation will impact both Quonset Point, from a cable coming up Narragansett Bay and landing at Quonset Point, as well as to our north, coming across Island Park, which is another part of Portsmouth, going under the golf course there, then taking a right-hand turn in that direction, going right up towards Providence, but it's really going to go to Somerset, Massachusetts. Both of those cables are extremely high voltage. They're going to mess up anything that's alive under the bay here for a long time. And that is not really taken into account by the siting boards that so far have kind of rubber stamped what's going on with offshore wind. The cables are huge because the cables have to be big because the electricity is tiny. So you need high voltage to take tiny electricity a long distance. And that's what's going to happen. The other thing is that Quonset Point, those buildings over there are bigger than several Walmarts altogether. You can't see that from here, but buildings of that size are going to be filled with lithium-ion batteries if these projects continue. And those lithium-ion batteries are very dangerous. The biggest ones in the world, well, the biggest one in the world, I think, was south of San Francisco at a place called Moss Landing. It's burned 4 times with toxic fumes that caused the whole population to have to evacuate. You don't want to have a battery farm near a population center. That would be a big mistake. But that's permitted. If the permit goes through for the offshore wind farm, the permit goes through for the batteries. Not a good deal. Either here at Quonset or way up there at Brayton Point in Massachusetts, there will be issues with fires eventually if that happens.
And when you say a large cable, can you give me an idea, some kind of comparison? Like how big is that cable? Like how wide, how long?
Cable looks like this. There'll usually be 2 or 3 of them. It'll contain a whole bunch of wires delivering electricity and a fiber optic core in the middle to deliver signals to telemetry and signals that operate the wind farm or the substation. So they're pretty big. They're like this. They have to be jet plowed into the bottom of the ocean, into Narragansett Bay.
Which is going to disrupt the fishing industry.
Yeah.
The jet plow.
The jet plowing does a couple of things, as John said, fishing, as well as bringing up all the bad chemicals that are still under the ground, under the bay here from the decades and decades in the 1800s up till the mid-1900s when we had our jewelry industry here in Providence and in Massachusetts. So all the rivers and tributaries emptying into the bay were carrying lead and mercury. It's under the ground. You really don't want to dig it up. It's going to be something that Save the Bay should be right on top of. I don't know if they are, but they need to be looking at it.
And it's going to harm the sea animals.
Yeah, well, it'll make pollution monitoring come to the forefront. And if these chemicals are in the water, that means no shellfishing. That means
swimming.
Or swimming.
No beaches anymore.
Right. And you won't know that until after they've done it, because nobody has done, to my knowledge, a sediment sampling to see what's really under there. They're just gone ahead figuring, well, we'll see what happens later. That's not a good way to do any project.
Anything else you'd like to add, either one of you?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Nipples?
We're not going to see wind turbines here in the bay, but we're going to see the most impact from them here in the bay. Because the turbines are offshore, like 15 to 30 miles. Those seabeds will be certainly off limits to fishing, because when you connect 1,000 turbines each a mile apart with wires, they're all connected to each other, you pretty much destroy the fishing industry around the turbines. You'll hear people say, oh, well, the turbine is going to be a place where fish are going to congregate. It's an artificial reef. Fishermen don't go to artificial reefs and drag nets. And so the fish that are there that happen to be in an artificial reef may be okay for sports fishermen, but the fishing industry will be dead. Putting together systems that include solar, wind, batteries, fossil fuel, and most importantly for me, nuclear. I'm a mechanical and a nuclear engineer. I worked for the Department of Energy to build small modular reactors on assembly lines using robots in teams that I helped with the design of these robots. Today, these small modular reactors are on submarines. The ones that I built for the government are all on submarines, many of them submarines built here at Quonset Point in Rhode Island. The U.S. Departments of Interior and Energy have just announced the cancellation or the hold of all offshore wind leases on the continental shelves. And at the same time, they've announced the quadrupling of nuclear reactors in the United States. These quadruples will be mostly SMRs, and they will be built first on government sites and military bases that need 24/7 reliable energy that is not dependent upon the sun going behind a cloud or the wind stopping for a few minutes. The licensing review cycle has been cut from years to 18 months in the last few weeks by executive orders. And these fourth generation small modular reactors are inherently safe by design. So it makes for licensing a lot easier when you have a system that can shut itself down without any human intervention. The bottom line is that wind and solar energy are the weakest forms of energy any nation can adopt. It's a big leap backwards. Solar and wind are 1 million times weaker than fossil and nuclear fuels. They require enormous, very expensive experimental machinery, like the monster wind turbines we're putting offshore here. They've never been tested. They do fall apart, as you probably know. One of them did recently. So these big experimental machines have to collect energy with environmental footprints that are so large that they're desecrating our oceans and our lands. The footprint includes very high voltage cables required to transport weak energy long distances from the ocean, under our beaches and our neighborhoods and in Narragansett Bay, to connect to the grid across the bay here at Quonset Point and up the bay at Brayton Point in Massachusetts. A better use of Brayton would be to put these modern small nuclear reactors underground because they can't physically melt or explode, and they can burn, they will burn all the existing waste from our old reactors. There are several designs that are called Generation 4 that can do these things. These designs use bomb-proof solid fuel called TRISO, T-R-I-S-O, or they use liquid fuel, liquid uranium or liquid thorium fuels. And these kinds of reactors that are liquid, they never need to shut down for refueling. They can be fueled while the reactor is running. It's like putting gasoline into your tank in your car. Now, I know you're not supposed to run your engine when you put gasoline in, but you can do this in a nuclear reactor. You can put the fuel in while the reactor is running if it's liquid fuel. Now, China has built the first one of these liquid fuel reactors running on thorium from a design that we in the United States invented during and just after the Manhattan Project. And we gave that design to China. And how in the world would we do that? Because the administration at that time, the Obama administration, guaranteed that the reactor was so safe that if China built it, that we would not have to worry about them making bombs from it or meltdowns or explosions. And they also knew that China is not hampered by energy policy that we have in this country that flip-flops every 4 years or 8 years. Therefore, China is leading the world and has started building these SMRs, and our regulators continue to ignore our own startups. If they continue to do that, we'll be making our energy using reactors built in China, like we buy iPhones, and ironically, like we buy 90% of the materials that go into solar and wind power. It all comes from China. So this country needs to use modern engineering to stop the political flip-flops of energy policy every 4 or 8 years, because it's killing us as a world economic powerhouse, and ultimately, it hampers our ability to protect ourselves as a sovereign nation. Pretty serious stuff.
Been involved with liquid natural gas, oil, shale gas, you name it, nuclear power, you name it, and I've seen it, worked it, and know the potentiality of each and every one of them. This wind is not the savior that they are professing. It's going to help, but you can't put all your eggs in one basket. There's no way that it's going to even come close to supplying the need, fitting the needs that we are about to enter. And everybody's talking about AI, artificial intelligence. The power needs that this AI is going to generate is horrendous. They're getting ready to start building nuclear plants again. After 30 years, they're going to draw the first couple of licenses to get these nuclear plants off the ground to start, and with the anticipation of the AI is going to explode. The taxpayer is going to end up saying, why are we doing this? Our intent was to save money. It's not going to happen. It's a promise that's going to be broken. And I hate to say it, but you've been lied to. Energy prices would stabilize if we utilize all the potential sources that we have at hand: oil, gas, nuclear. But if you rely on one, the cost is going to be out of this world. It's just not feasible for these windmills that generate very little megawatt to supply the need that we're going to have coming up in the very near future.
So Ocean State Current has a campaign called Assault on Rhode Island Families. So would you say that the possibility of the energy prices becoming so expensive that it would be hard for the average family to pay?
We have the highest energy prices in the country. I've worked on natural gas pipelines that have been shut down, excuse me, These pipelines were started and are sitting dormant, buried, end caps welded on the end of these pipes where they've just stopped operation, and pipelines rot in the ground because of the politicians failing to utilize natural gas because they've been lied to, saying it's dangerous. There's probably 3 or 4 I know of pipelines in Rhode Island that all could be feeding natural gas to the rest of New England and lower the heating costs if they would just finish these projects. But they've been buried, and people in the higher up are pretending like they were never even started. And it doesn't have to be that way if we just utilize all the potentials that we have. That's oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, all of the above, not just one. When you get just one, you got a monopoly. When you got a monopoly, they charge whatever they want.
There's no cables save our Sakonnet River and Mount Hope Bay. This is where I live, and I live here in this town. This is, I'm going to say, my town. The cables are coming down near my neighborhood, and I'm very worried. I'm extremely worried. 150,000 volts of power coming through the cables, and I'm sure folks will say, it's okay, it's going to be underground. I don't trust. And then South Coast Wind is going to potentially request another 350,000 volts of electricity cables to come within inches of the first 350,000 volts of cables.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Brooke. I'm born and raised Rhode Island resident, and I'm a property owner also here in Rhode Island. There are many residents in Rhode Island that are opposed to South Coast Wind's application, specifically with respect to the recent federal policy shift impacting offshore wind projects. On July 7, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order directing the Treasury Department to limit wind and solar tax credits. The executive order argues that wind and solar are unreliable, compromise the electric grid, and harm the nation's natural landscape. Furthermore, it prioritizes affordable, reliable energy sources like oil, gas, coal, and nuclear, stating that wind and solar should not displace these. Additionally, the Big Beautiful Bill recently passed ends tax credits for wind projects unless they produce electricity by December 31, 2027, or start construction within a year of the bill's enactment. This federal shift fundamentally challenges the assumptions underlying South Coast Wind's project. The executive order emphasizes that wind energy relies on subsidies to be profitable and possess risks to national security, economic growth, and fiscal health. These changes signal a clear move at the federal level away from supporting offshore wind, seriously raising questions about the project's long-term viability and cost-effectiveness for Rhode Island residents. I would like everyone to consider the ill effects and look at the big picture that South Coast Wind brings into our town. With all of the construction and laying down these high-voltage cables, the impact it would have on our neighborhood, our transportation routes, are already backed up from Mount Hope Bridge on Bristol Ferry Road and Boyd's Lane. Our local family-run businesses and their employees and their livelihoods would all risk losing business once our roads are all torn up. The electric bills in Rhode Island have tripled in the last year, with no regard for our residents due to a lot of the infrastructure with the wind energy. I hope we all can do the right thing and seriously think about the negative impact of wind energy Let's all do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. November of 2024, and 35 years prior, my electric bill was always between $90 to $120 a month. Since last November, my electric bill now ranges from $325 to $350 a month. I have not changed anything. If anything, I buckle my belt a little bit more. I'm not cooking as much, and I'm very conscious of keeping lights off when I'm not in the room. So it's affecting everyone in a very difficult way.